And hello and welcome to another segment of DSU Inside Perspective. I'm Carlos Holmes, and this is the show where we talk with faculty, staff, students, guests about some of the things that are going on in the world and some of the great things that are going on at Delaware State University. One of the great people we have at Delaware State University is Dr. Sam Huff. He's a George Washington Distinguished Professor of History and Political Science here at Delaware State University. And I asked him to come on to talk with us about the Islamic State, also known as ISIS. Dr. Huff, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. Although ISIS has really been in the news all the time here over the last few months, I still believe that for many people, ISIS, the Islamic State, is a horrific abstraction. What is this group and how did they come about?
Well, Carlos, we first have to really go back to the history of Islam and look at the Prophet Muhammad, who led that religion, and also about what happened after he passed. The question was who would follow up from his leadership. Would it be someone in his extended family, or could it be his supporters? That really is the difference between the Shia and the Sunni division of the Muslim faith. The Shia wanting the immediate family, and Sunnis saying that followers could do it as well. Fast forward to modern day Iraq, which is majority Shia. However, it was run during the days of Saddam Hussein by a Sunni leader. And we know, of course, what happened in the Gulf War of 1991. And then in 2003, when the U.S. invaded under the auspices that there were weapons of mass destruction and toppled the regime of Saddam Hussein. That brought in a new government that was majority Shia, who locked Sunnis out of various positions in the government, got them out of the military for which they had run that, and it caused, at first, disagreement that ended up in open hostility for the Sunni minority. And that really led to an insurrection for which the well-known terrorist group Al-Qaeda became involved in support of Sunni rebels. From that, over a series of years, we got an offshoot that was an extremist contingent of Al-Qaeda, referred to as ISIS, and that really is where ISIS emanated from. And as we know, over the last 6 months, they've gobbled up a lot of territory in Iraq, while also acquiring territory in Syria during the war that has killed almost 200,000 people in that country.
You know, it's interesting because I've always thought of Al-Qaeda as extremists, so I guess we got to think of that ISIS as ultra-extremists, I guess.
Well, and when we think about Al-Qaeda, we think about a terrorist group that has been in 60 countries around the world.
Now, I think a lot of people think of a group that ran some planes into the Twin Towers and into the Pentagon. That's what they think when they think of Al-Qaeda.
And certainly responsible for that as well. So when you think of a group that might be even more extreme, it's scary. Yeah. And well, although it took a while, the U.S. got involved.
Well, now, you know, a lot of people characterize the Islamic State, ISIS, as a terrorist group. But this isn't like Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was not taking land and holding on to it. ISIS has land it's occupying in Syria and Iraq. Is it a bit of an oversimplification to call them just a terrorist group?
Well, you know, whether you call them a militia or even a semi-sovereign state, you go back to the original definition of terrorism, which obviously if we're saying they're an offshoot of Al-Qaeda and we define Al-Qaeda as a terrorist group, that's certainly one answer to that. But I think the more basic answer is trying to pin down the definition of terrorism, which is the one killing of innocent lives for political purposes. And I certainly think that ISIS matches that description. So an international terrorist group can be large enough to hold land in the way that ISIS does. But I certainly think that they match the definition that we have, State Department has, the U.S. government has, of a terrorist organization.
Well, talking about wanton acts against innocent people, I mean, they certainly captured everybody's imagination on a negative side with these beheadings. What are they trying to prove? What are they trying to express with these behaving?
Well, that's a good question. I think you could certainly say that there is an effort to intimidate the West and countries supportive of the West from getting involved. That's certainly why you could argue that Egypt has not gotten involved with the United States as much as they might, and where other countries have, such as the UK and France, their own citizens have been beheaded by ISIS. But there is another reason, and I think it's a recruitment device for ISIS, for people who believe that the West needs its comeuppance and that kind of violence can be tolerated, and that this group seems to be aggressive in its goals, and that has apparently led even some Americans to try to get over to the Middle East and join the group.
President Barack Obama has been very busy trying to appeal to our allies and other partners to join in the fight against ISIS, with some success, I believe. He's been to the United Nations and made appeals there recently. But in the midst of all this, we still have this adversarial relationship with Syria. And now we've launched airstrikes, not only in Iraq, but also in Syria, against a foe who is also a foe of Syria. But still, Syria remains an adversary of ours as well, although we're not going to war with them, at least not now. I mean, what can we make of all this? I mean, how is this going to impact our future concerns with Syria?
Well, your point about the Obama administration's policy is well taken. President Obama, of course, made a national speech in reference to our policy towards ISIS, and then recently appeared at the UN to try to call support for that. And it has been successful. We've got not only our standard allies like France and the UK, but countries in the Middle East like Jordan and the UAE and Saudi Arabia who are actually conducting airstrikes. We have other countries who are training Kurdish fighters on behalf of that. But back to the issue of what's going to happen if this group is able to establish some sort of a permanent government in these two areas of Iraq and Syria. My view is that the Obama administration's goal of trying to stabilize the Iraqi government is a good one and is necessary, because if we can get that government stabilized, then chances are the military will become a more effective fighting force, and along with the Kurds in the north, we'd be able to limit, if not even kick out ISIS from Iraq. That would mean that we could limit them in Syria, in what is, after all, a rather cesspool of various groups, both in the Syrian government and from the opposition, fighting one another.
And leave them to be serious problem.
Well, and at least temporarily, but we do have to have compassion for the 200,000 people who have lost their lives in that civil war, and many others who have become homeless. But you're right. I mean, I can't see the United States picking up right away to ally with Syria in this issue. We have to remember that Hezbollah, a terrorist organization, has come in support of Syria in this battle, and that there are other groups fighting the government that are not necessarily friends of the U.S. either.
Well, it's going to bear watching. Dr. Huff, thank you so much for joining us today here
Sure.
on DSU Inside Perspective. And thank you for joining us. You have a good day.